So we're back with another Perils in Paradise card review, and apparently I forgot to change out of my green shirt, so I'm gonna be a little invisible, but we're just gonna roll with it because we got some super cool Rogue legendary cards in this one. I mean, Rogue got some really fun stuff. I'm looking forward to both of these. Up first is Treasure Hunter Eudora. Freshly revealed a 6-mana 4/5 pirate with Battle Cry. Go on a side quest to discover amazing loot. Play 3 cards from other classes to complete it. Here you can see the side quest that gets equipped when you play your Treasure Hunter Eudora. Basically says the same thing. Now the pieces of loot are actually Duels Treasures, which makes me super excited because I still miss Duels, of course. So getting to relive Duels Treasures in Standard once again, kind of like with Kazakhstan in the past, and you are going to be able to discover 2 of these. I think the power ranges vary dramatically from top to bottom. A Spyglass or a Necrotic Poison or whatever, those are good cards compared to a regular Hearthstone card, but they're not nearly as impactful as like Book of the Dead or sometimes Embers of Ragnaros can just be like lethal. Sometimes Wax Rager can be infinite value, right? So there will definitely be some moments where you get 2 completely insane game-winning sort of treasures, perhaps because they're literally game-winning in that moment, or they're just so overwhelming in value or swing or whatever it is. That they just carry you to victory. There will be other times, it's kind of a mixed bag. And I think sometimes you will still, unfortunately, low roll even among 3 choices. There will be some instances where there just are 3 kind of weak options. You get a puzzle box, a looming presence, and a spyglass, and you're like, oh God, what have I done here? Hopefully the average result is still pretty solid because one, pretty good choice will sneak its way in there. But if you look at this list, I'd say about half I'm really excited about in Standard. Maybe another 25% are pretty situationally good. Clockwork Assistant can be amazing or just kind of bad depending on the matchup, how many spells you've cast, etc. You can also chase the Quel'Dalar, it looks like. Both Blade and Hilt are in here, which is pretty cool. So, I don't know. I think you're going to be fairly happy with the results. But I will say, it's not Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan, you got to choose 5. You got 2 copies of each. So you had so many chances to hit some really good key stuff when you play that Kazakhstan. Now, the Kazakhstan, of course, did put them in your deck as opposed to in your hand. So sometimes they were a little bit delayed. Particularly, you might have to find your way through a few bad ones to get a good one. But ultimately, with any sort of card draw, then you could just get some great stuff and have a lot of powerful tools to end a game. With Eudora, you're only getting 2 off of the side quest. She is a little cheaper to play at 6, and like I said, again, you get them immediately in hand, which could be an upside. If you get double Book of the Dead, might just be lethal in hand. Embers could set up for a lethal on a future turn, that sort of thing. Does become interesting. But I do fear that it doesn't lack that consistent game-ending potential that Kazakhstan always had in a similar sort of position. You may not need it necessarily for Rogue, right? There's just that kind of excavate Rogue game plan of just make a million things and eventually overwhelm the opponent with a million things off my Scorpions and now my Eudoras, and we're going to talk about some thief stuff in this video as well, where maybe this is just another piece of that puzzle and it doesn't have to be your sort of end game win condition like something like a Kazakhstan. It is a battle cry though, so there are ways to bounce this back in hand and kind of replay it, but you're gonna have to redo the quest again if you want to do that. So it does still take time and some more pieces to complete that puzzle. And I do worry that sometimes it'll fall off a little bit. And between the sometimes inconsistent results where you low roll a little bit and you miss your good stuff, the upfront cost of playing this for 6, where you're just taking this really down 6 cost play, those things all combine to me to a card that is unfortunately a tad slow and risky to execute. Oh God, I forgot to talk about Eudora in the context of Paladin. It's so easy to forget with these tourist cards. Eudora kind of makes sense in Paladin if you're willing to run rogue cards specifically, since it says from other classes. Of course, you know, if you're just running rogue cards, any rogue cards in your deck from your tourist will contribute to the Eudora. I think that's kind of iffy. You'd have to commit to quite a few to have like enough happening regularly enough for your treasure hunt. You know, like you have to be drawing in enough rogue cards for that to matter. And Paladin doesn't have a lot of great ways to generate, or maybe any ways to generate cards from other classes otherwise. So it's really tying its fate to a rogue commitment. That said, we are going to see a few cards that do kind of reward this idea. So maybe there could be this little rogue package in Paladin to enable the Eudora. I'm not, again, convinced Eudora will be worth it to make that sacrifice, but it is still playable and possible in Paladin. So moving on to the next rogue legendary. This one is also kind of a thief support card in its own way. Maestra is back. She is a 6 mana, 6/5. She's the Warlock tourist. So this does mean when you put this in your rogue deck, you can, of course, run Warlock cards, which that inherently can give you some thief support because, you know, you've got your Treasure Hunter Eudora, play cards from other classes. You don't even have to necessarily generate any, although, of course, we know Rogue is also very good at generating them, but this could be a way to add some extra consistency depending on the Warlock cards and how good of a fit they might feel like. But also, more importantly, perhaps, is this battle cry: discover a hero card from the past from another class. And we can actually look at the hero cards of old and kind of get an idea here for the sorts of things that you might be discovering. Some of these seem pretty insane still. Guff looks nuts. Rexar on occasion. Alakir is confirmed already by Blizzard to be in there. Alakir could be pretty cool. The Battlecry might not be great, but that has a pretty nutty hero power. As you might recall, give your hero Divine Shield. They gain +2 attack and Wind Fury. That's pretty nuts. So some pretty good. Galacrons won't be in there, by the way, because I think they have that infused thing, which means they won't get discovered. But like Cariel is completely insane, right? There are some good hits. I would say the older they get, the worse they get on average. Like, you know, Jaina, Uther don't really hold up that well these days. Might be kind of hard to utilize those. Some of them are super synergistic, like Gul'dan. You probably don't have enough demons for that. Zul'jin could be kind of nuts, of course, right? Especially if you're casting cards from a lot of different classes. So there are some really good results. And I think with a Discover in particular, hey, Shill, we'll talk about you in a minute. Well, whoopsie. With Discover in particular, I think you're going to get a good one. Like there's probably not 3 terrible ones, like maybe 1 out of 20 times or something. You get like 3 that are just awful for you, but probably going to get something relatively well that still, I think, holds up in modern day Hearthstone. Okay. The big challenge, of course, is that you're taking this 6 mana turn to do that. It's like, man, I'm just kind of passing on turn 6. Then I got to play this expensive hero card later too, which may not actually give me all that much, like recovery. Some of them have some built-in stabilizing factors, but sometimes it's just heal 5 and do something else, right? 5 armor in essence. So kind of a tough one to weave in again. I kind of have the same concerns. Both of these being 6-cost legendary is like kind of hard to get in. But the really like craziness here is that, well, of course, when you play a hero card from another class, you become that class. So you're no longer a rogue, which means if you play Tess Greymane, you're going to be able to replay all of your rogue cards. So you could, you know, normally Tess is casting a bunch of random stuff. You could actually build a list that's playing your rogue thing specifically. There's also the card Bounce Around still in standard, which returns all of your minions to your hand, which kind of gives you an infinite loop because it will return your Tess Greymane to your hand, because both Tess and Bounce Around will get replayed every time. Well, Tess will be on board anyway, I guess, because you're playing her. So you're just going to be making all of these tests. Now, there is some like hand size concerns there. Obviously, you might be drawing cards, generating cards, bouncing other minions back to hand. So, you know, it's infinite in a way. It's probably not actually infinite, but there are still some crazy chains possible where you're just playing tests like 4 or 5 times in a game or something before that all breaks down and craziness ensues. And that could be a bit of a win condition in its own right. But it is a lot of work and it is a lot of mana up front. That does feel like something that's going to be awesome for videos, but might be hard to work in a real meta environment. I'm not actually convinced either of these things feel better than just what Excavate Rogue is doing today. It's all kind of in a similar vein, and Excavate Rogue does kind of fit in with this, of course, right? Like we see the same thief synergies there with the Excavate legendary reward. Does it get better with these? Or do they not help, or maybe even make it worse? I wonder. That said, two just like super fun, crazy cool looking legendaries. I obviously want to play these a ton, even if they're not, to me, the strongest competitive cards. There's cheesiness possible, there's craziness possible, but I have those consistency fears holding both of these back, which I'm sure you guys are going to get mad at me for giving these like mediocre scores because they're so cool. It's not hating on the cards. I love the cards. They're so cool. I have to be a realist sometimes with scores, and I think these are going to feel kind of clunky and expensive, and Rogue already does this stuff really, really well and really efficiently. So next up here is Sea Shill, a new 3-mana 3/2 pirate. Battlecry, the next card you play from a non-rogue class costs 2 less. So this is really important wording. The non-rogue specifically does not say from another class. So when you play this in Paladin with Linessa, the Paladin tourist that visits rogue, this card can be played in Paladin. It does work on Paladin cards. So any Paladin card, like, you know, if you have a 6-cost Paladin card that you want to play on turn 4, the Sea Shill would make that possible, right? This is also just the next card you play. It's not this turn, so you can play this on 3 and set up for later, allowing you to potentially cheat some bigger stuff into play earlier in the game, which is exactly the sort of thing certain decks look for. I'm comparing this in my mind to the Mage card we saw this week that had to be on board. It was the first spell each turn. That one was hard to work with because you couldn't set it up into a future turn, right? If it dies on board, you lose that upside for later. So that one was purely about kind of like a tempo advantage of cheesing a 3/3 into play, hoping it magically survives. This one, you don't care. You just slam it and you know it's going to work for later here and create some opportunities there. So that's actually pretty cool in Paladin. I'm curious if cheating some big things into play is going to be a possibility with Sea Shill. That's something to keep an eye on. Of course, also, we've just got the Rogue side of it. Warlock cards can be played in Rogue, so this could help you cheat a Warlock card out as well in Rogue. And alternatively, of course, generating stuff from other classes in a Thief Rogue deck can also be discounted by the Sea Shill. So to me, this looks like good for multiple angles. You know, it's sacrificing a little bit now, but for that big upside later. And it's not just a tempo advantage. It actually lets you get those big things down faster, which that's where the cost discounts become really interesting to me. It's not just about cheating a body out a little earlier. So really intriguing. Also, keep in mind with like Shadow Step and stuff too on this effect will stack. So you could like bounce this a couple times and cheat like a 10-drop into play on turn 5 or something, you know, whatever it is. Some cool possibilities do exist with the Sea Shill. So next up here is the Conniving Conman, a 4-mana 4/4 pirate with Battlecry. Replay the last card you've played from another class. And this card's intriguing. I don't think this card would be particularly exciting to me if it were purely thinking about like randomly generated thief cards. You know, sometimes you could have like a big spell you get off a Scorpion or something and replay it. But it does feel like the sort of thing that would be sitting dead in hand rather often and feel kind of unpredictable, just waiting for that big moment. But of course, because you can run Warlock cards in Rogue and because you can play this in Paladin and run Rogue cards, which will be another class. It's based on your hero, not the card, as I understand. So, you know, you could replay a previous Rogue card, basically, in a Paladin deck. I don't know if that's super exciting. I don't know that we see anything in this that's great. I mean, there is going to be this Snatch and Grab card. You could, like, play this and then play your Conman to, like, replay it, but it's not that good. This just destroys 2 random enemy minions. So probably not that exciting in Paladin, but in Rogue with Warlock cards, if there are some great Warlock cards that show up, particularly anything that hits on curve or is just big enough and crazy enough to reward the Conniving Conman, then that's a little bit more reliable. You're not just relying on randomly generated things. You're baking some upside into your deck so that you know the Conman has some good, reliable targets. And I think that's what you'd need. So he has that potential craziness off high rolls, off generated stuff, and kind of a baseline expectation as well. And that's where the Conman would feel better to me. So moving on to Snatch and Grab. This is an 8-mana spell. Destroy 2 random enemy minions. It costs 1 less for each card you've played from another class. And this is not that interesting to me. Just that 2 random enemy minions getting destroyed is, I think, a really bad effect. There are so many little tokens and tiny little bodies in the game nowadays. It's hard for that to find a reliable result. Yes, of course, there are some boards that is just a Titan or whatever, and you might be happy to use this to destroy a Titan here and there, but I think this will be sitting awkwardly in hand for a long time. I also think it's actually somewhat difficult to discount. Clearly, if you're running enough Warlock cards, that'd be reliable. Yes, of course, a batch of Scorpion stuff can discount this pretty quickly too, but it's just a lot of work to get to that stage, and your result here is just middling. I think it's not really that good. Very situational. Even playing this for 0 is still not going to feel amazing in some cases. So just taking up that slot in your deck for quite a bit of work and not that good of a result feels like a problem to me. Moving on, we've got some coin stuff showing up here, and do keep in mind that Wishing Well is still a card in standard format Hearthstone. Let's pull up Wishing Well here real quick to remind everybody. Wishing Well for Rogue, after you play a coin, get a random legendary minion from another class. So this is another way to potentially fuel some thief stuff alongside these coin synergies. Metal Detectors, 3 mana 2/2. After your hero attacks and kills a minion, get a coin. I think this one's a little tough to work with. Like, that 2 damage is not the best breakpoint these days. Even 1-drops often have 3 health now and then. So I think it could be a little awkward to reliably get your coins. The numbers on this feel small. Now, we are going to see a weapon later in the video that can buff, or excuse me, a minion that can buff a weapon up to a 3/3. But that's just like chasing a bad card with, you know, I think that's actually a good card, but not on bad weapons. In other words, like you're going to have to play a 3/3 just to make this weapon reasonable. And that's 2 3-drops. Like, they just don't curve out that well together. I think that's actually rather clunky. So I do think generating coins is good. Obviously, I just think this card's going to have a bit of a hard time achieving that reliably. Clearly, you know, there are attack buffs and stuff in Rogue. There are ways to get your weapons, you know, advanced, but you're still spending 3 on this at the end of the day. And although coins, again, great, just too awkward to get it going. So moving on to O Manager, I like this one a little bit more. It's just 2 mana spell. It deals 2 damage, and if you combo it, you get a coin. So this one's a little more flexible. It's still only 2 damage, but that 2 damage doesn't have to kill a minion. So if you just want to ship it face, you know, in essence, you can. Keep in mind also, I forgot to mention this on the Metal Detector, but of course these can both be played in Paladin as well, which coins can get a little bit of double duty in Paladin thanks to Lanessa. And if you're running these in Paladin, you are of course running Lanessa, so those coins can help you like cheat out a crazy turn, which could be something pretty good for O Manager, because you might want to like save this for a lethal push or something, or a key moment, and then you're kind of chaining this all together, right? You're getting 2 O Managers with your Lanessa. That's 4 damage. You're getting some coins to weave in some additional damage as well. You can start to see everything coming together more easily in that sort of package, whereas the weapon, it just feels like it's potential setup, but it's just hard to achieve as consistently. So this one just to me feels more flexible in a way to do the same sort of thing, and I think actually both Rogue and Paladin could get a lot of use out of this. So here's that minion we teased earlier, a 3 mana 3/3 pirate with battle cry, set the attack and durability of your weapon to 3, which this is actually pretty cool. Like, just think about a hero power on turn 2 into the Sword Shiner on turn 3. That's nice. That gives you a good 3/3 weapon basically that you only spent 2 mana on, and you can even swing on turn 2 as well, clean something up or get a little chip damage, and you're still going to end up with that 3/3 weapon. It doesn't give an additional 3/3 stats, it just sets it to 3, so feel free to use any durability along the way. Of course, we've also got other weapons you could buff. There's like the, what is that called, the Quick Pick, I think. You know, it's the dual class card in Rogue. That one's actually pretty insane. The Quick Pick here, after your hero attacks, draw a card. Like, that is an awesome result. You know, 3 of those is pretty amazing. And then this can also be played in Paladin, and as we know, Painter's Virtue, the hand buff card in Paladin, is insane. So you can attack with your Painter's Virtue twice, then play probably a 5/5 swarthy sword shiner, and turn your Painter's Virtue back into a 3/3 again, actually even a little bigger, and go again. So you kind of get like 5 swings on a Painter's Virtue. I don't know if that's actually good. Like, at some point there's diminishing returns on all the extra stats, but it's kind of crazy to think about. But in essence, anytime a cool weapon with an effect that you like exists, the Sword Shiner can actually make it kind of nuts. And I think it's just good on the hero power for tempo as well. So pirates, I think there's going to be some cool aggressive pirate decks. Weapon decks and rogue, this card just looks really good. And then finally here we have the Knickknack Shack. This is a 3-mana location with 4 durability. This lets you draw a card, and if you play it this turn, you get to reopen the Knickknack Shack and draw again, which you can imagine being pretty spicy and some stuff like a Miracle-y rogue build with a bunch of cheap cards. You play this on turn 3. You probably don't actually activate it right away on turn 3. And then on turn 4, you kind of start hitting this button. You might be able to reliably get 2 or 3 hits out of this, even as early as turn 4. And then anytime this comes down later in a game as well, even if you have to spend the mana on the same turn, it's like turn 8 or 9 or whatever, you got 5 or 6 mana left over, you might be able to chain through basically all 4 of these hits with cheap enough cards that you're happy to weave in. So I could see some spicy turns with this. That's also going to enable things like that Location Giant that could get discounted pretty rapidly. I also think Paladin sometimes is a class that does just need card draw in like greedier, more like, Highlander Paladin decks and stuff. They can't generate a lot of things, but because of their Mirage guy. But some card draw in a pinch in Paladin too. Like this could be a nice option for a Reno Paladin list that just needs a way to get 4 cards drawn. Even if you don't play them this turn and reopen it immediately, this is still just 3 mana draw 4 over a long enough time frame, right? And if the game's going long enough, that's going to feel really efficient. We in the past saw like the priest location with the buff. Sometimes that was just good as a card draw. The buff was fine, but occasionally you'd buff your opponent's stuff just to draw cards because priest needed card draw. I could see this living in a similar space in Paladin, although probably not in Rogue. The question is, are you willing to run Linessa as the Paladin tourist for just like 1 or 2 select Rogue cards? It starts to become iffy, although I think she has enough upside that you could. There's also some worlds where you kind of weave all that together and you have like coin generators and stuff, and you're generating, extra mana off all your coins and Linessas that enables the Knickknack Shack to get off more cards, and then you create this like miracle turn. There's some fun stuff possible there. So I do think this actually feels pretty efficient in total output, if a little slow sometimes for Rogue, but still ways to build into it too. So all that said, let's go ahead and rate these cards from 1 to 5 stars. Treasure Hunter Eudora is a 3-star card. Maestra Mask Merchant is a 4-star card. Sea Shill is a 4-star card. Conniving Conman is a 3-star card. Snatch and Grab is a 2-star card. Metal Detector is a 2-star card. Knickknack Shack is a 3-star card. O Manager is a 4-star card. Swarthy Sword Shiner is a 4-star card. And yeah, there you go. That's the Rogue set. Really fun looking stuff, dude. I mean, Excavate Rogue is already a really fun deck to play. Sometimes frustrating to play against, I think. But some extra pieces here potentially for that. I'm worried they're going to get cut, though, just from a like raw speed and like competitive standpoint. I don't know if they're as good as what it's doing now, but by God, do they look fun. Like I really hope I'm wrong. I hope Eudora is good. I gave Maestra 4 stars primarily just because she's a tourist card. I actually think from the effect standpoint, this is probably a 3-star card. But it might get run, like we've said, for the tourist cards. It's good enough that the tourist side of it might just be what gets it over the hump and becomes pretty reliably played. But yeah, some fun stuff, man. I think Rogue got a really cool set. It's very, very interesting. Both legendaries look crazy fun. Curious to hear your thoughts on these cards down below in the comments. Thanks much as always for watching, and until next time, game on.